10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albi Amankona, Reem Ibrahim, Benjamin Butterworth and Leo Kearse. Tonight on the show, by-election bombshell, is Sunak snookered?
Immigration without integration is bound to fail.
Why free speech is now under threat.
Why we should not be sending shoplifters to prison.
Why Greta's support for Hamas shows that she doesn't care about the climate at all.
It's 8 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. Come the next election, this is the only show which is going to have more presenters than there are Tory MPs. I'm joined by Albi and Benjamin, as usual, but Emily is off this weekend, so we're joined by the ever-dynamic Reem Ibrahim from the Institute of Economic Affairs and the never-dynamic Leo Kearse from the Institute of Winding Up Left-Wingers. You know the drill by now. Each host gets 60 seconds to outline their argument about a chosen topic, then we'll all pile in and eventually agree that Benjamin is wrong. And of course, we want to know your views on all the topics as well. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. And don't forget your chance to flummox the 5. We're 2 hours again this week, so get your questions in now for the end of the show. Nothing is off limits. Everything from Leo's dress sense to Tory election prospects, though both may be equally dire. But before we start tearing each other apart, it's your Saturday Night News with Lisa Hartle.
I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB newsroom. The UK is calling on Israel to show military restraint in its war with Hamas. Addressing a peace summit in Egypt, the Foreign Secretary said he's spoken to the Israeli government about its duty to respect international law and the importance of preserving civilian lives. James Cleverly also told the conference efforts need to be made to prevent an escalation in violence.
We have a duty to work together to prevent instability from engulfing the region and claiming yet more lives. We must work together to prevent the tragic situation in Gaza becoming a regional conflict, because that is exactly what Hamas wants.
Trucks carrying humanitarian aid have now reached southern Gaza. It's after the Rafah crossing on the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. Israel imposed a blockade preventing the delivery of food, water and fuel after the Hamas terror attack. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has vowed to continue to fight until all hostages being held by Hamas are freed. It's after 2 American citizens, Judith Ranan and her 17-year-old daughter, Natalie, were released yesterday. Hamas says the decision was made on humanitarian grounds. It's believed more than 200 people are still being held by the terrorist group. Pro-Palestinian protests have been taking place in cities across the UK. They're calling for an end to the conflict in the Middle East and demanding the government stop supporting Israel's actions. Police estimate up to 100,000 people took part in a protest through central London. In Salford, a group marched to the BBC's Media City headquarters over the corporation's reporting of the Israel-Hamas conflict. And around 2,000 people also took to the streets in Belfast. Rallies were also held in Birmingham and Cardiff. In other news, tributes are being paid to Sir Bobby Charlton, who has died at the age of 86. He was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966 and a club legend at Manchester United. His family said he passed peacefully in the early hours of this morning. In a statement, United described Sir Bobby as one of the most beloved players in the history of the club. The Prince of Wales, who's president of the FA, called him a true great who will be remembered forever. The Environment Agency is warning floods are likely to continue near major rivers in England until Tuesday. Storm Babette is dumping heavy rain in parts of the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. Nottinghamshire County Council has declared a major incident with severe flooding warnings in Derby. The City Council says it's experiencing the highest recorded water levels of the River Derwent, with roads flooded across the city. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to the Saturday 5.
Cheers, Lisa. Now, folks, it's your Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, and when it's cold and wet outside, you really are best off settling down for the next 2 hours and enjoying some heated debate from all of us. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than putting the heating on. Now, let's crack on with tonight's first topic. Thousands of people took part in a pro-Palestine demonstration in London today, to the anger of many, it has to be said, just a couple of weeks after the sickening Hamas assault on Israel. But Reem Ibrahim says the right to free speech must be unassailable, even if you don't agree with what they're saying. It's high time we live the Reem.
Thank you, Darren. Now, I believe in the fundamental freedom of expression. I think that when we're looking at across the world in which countries have descended to authoritarianism, they tend to stop allowing freedom of expression. Now, I completely understand that many individuals are incredibly upset as a result of various different protests. This particular phrase that's been used time and time again during these protests, Palestine will be free, and this idea that actually it's from the river to the sea. Now, this particular quote has resulted in a lot of hate online, a lot of people saying that this particular phrase should actually be banned. Many people that are usually on my side of the argument, many people that actually usually argue for free speech, have now descended into arguing for the complete decimation of this kind of individual freedom. Now, I would argue that I would like to see any individual that supports potentially prescribed terrorist organisations like Hamas, I would like to see them saying those things in the open so that we know where they are. Ultimately, if we start to ban different phrases, if we start to tell people that it is illegal to say different things, they are going to continue to talk about these ideas underground and unchallenged. I think it's incredibly important that we allow the fundamental right to freedom of expression, whether we agree with those opinions or not. And I would like to see the right to protest be used across the board. Now, the Metropolitan Police have also put out a statement calling out for effectively the individuals that are going to those protests to not support terrorist organisations. What they have said, though, is that they do have the right to protest and they do have the right to call out for these particular phrases. Now, this particular phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, can be interpreted in many, many different ways. But ultimately, if we're going to be banning language, we're going to descend into a slippery slope of authoritarianism. So, Leo, I'm particularly interested in what your perspective might be on this. Do you think that there should be a limit to free speech?
Well, of course there have to be limits to free speech. I mean, I'm a big advocate of free speech, but free speech can't be absolute. You can't have jihadis on the streets of London calling for murder, calling for the genocide of Jews, and really saying it, really having an impact. People are going out there and committing terrorist atrocities. We saw just a few days ago a guy in Belgium driving around on his moped shouting Allah Akbar and then murdering Swedish football fans. So this is real world stuff. This isn't some academic discussion. So obviously we need to limit freedom of speech. And I'm fine. You know, these people can have their rallies and their protests and wave their ISIS flags, but do it in the Muslim world, do it in the Arab world. I think it's terrible that Britain has been so soft and allowed completely alien cultures that hate us and hate civilization and want to destroy us to take root and fester and grow.
Now, I mean, I would argue that it's not the culture that's doing that. It's actually there are a very small percentage of the population, of these individuals that might be attending these protests that would argue that Hamas are a fantastic organisation that are supporting the freedom of Palestine. Now, I think we have to call it out and say that's unequivocally wrong, and actually many of those individuals would have their freedom of expression reduced. But ultimately, when we're arguing for free speech, it can't just be for ideas that we agree with.
No,
we have to do it.
But this goes beyond an idea. This is incitement to violence, and that's a crime. And I can't believe the Met Police are pussyfooting around and saying, "Oh no, the call to jihad can have several meanings." Well, none of them are good. No. It's not like jihad can sometimes mean a cup of tea.
Actually, I will say, and I mean, I'm somebody that grew up in a sort of Muslim family, Muslim household. The word jihad itself does not necessarily mean terrorism. It actually means my struggle. Now, of course, that has been
Hitler. Hitler had the same.
Well, indeed. Now, it has again been taken by various individuals, and various different organisations have taken it to mean many things. I think investigations are perfectly reasonable into people that use the phrase because of the way it's been defined. I mean, Albie, what's your perspective?
Well, look, I think my perspective is I think it's completely inappropriate for people to be shouting the chant from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free. You know, I think most people interpret that as the Israeli state should be wiped off the face of the world. Because that is what it means to many people.
Let's break it down.
That's literally what it means.
When you listen to Jews who explain what it means, that is what they say, and I trust them when that is what they are saying. But what I will say is, where I do agree with you, is where people that are calling for the protests themselves to be banned. I mean, that's complete nonsense. Of course, you can't be banning people protesting for the freedom of Palestine, or people protesting because they think what is going on in Gaza and the humanitarian crisis and there is unacceptable. It is unacceptable.
Reem, I just want to test how far you'll go with this, because I think we've got a video from London's Tube today in which there was a chant said. So let's have a listen and a watch of that.
Free Palestine! Hope you will have a blessed day today. Look after yourselves.
So this is interesting because...
Should he be sacked?
So this is interesting again. I do think that it's inappropriate for a public servant, somebody that's being paid by taxpayer money, to be entering into political discussions. Now, I don't know if you guys saw in the video, he used the tannoid to talk about Palestine being free. Again, that is inappropriate because it's a public sector figure, a train driver utilising the power that he has on the train to advocate for something political. I think that's wrong.
Especially when you think about the history of Jews and trains, I think it's the worst place you can possibly do it.
Well, I mean, Benjamin, surely this is just for British Jews. They're saying, I don't think I can live in Sadiq Khan's London anymore.
I mean, look, I think one random tube driver isn't reflective of the mayor or of the city. But look, you know, Reem, I'm sure lots of people were cheering you on in that. All of them terrorists, I suspect. You know what? It is incredibly naive.
Every protester in London was a terrorist.
No, but the people that would be supporting the right to shout jihad and to ban the state of Israel and to insult the existence of Jews, those are the people that you're supporting. And the thing is, you don't seem to recognise that there is no perfect form of freedom. There is no pure freedom. You have to manage it. So the reason that somebody couldn't stand in the street and shout racist abuse at Albie, that wouldn't be acceptable because that would take away his freedom to go about his life on a basic level.
Absolutely not.
And that's what these people, that's what these people are doing, because they are shouting abuse that means an average Jewish person just trying to go about their lives, or an Israeli person trying to go about their lives, is threatened and unable to feel safe.
OK.
And that is where the line is.
So let's talk about this particular phraseology that I mentioned in the introduction. Palestine will be free, and this idea that it's from the river to the sea. Now, from the river to the sea, we're talking about a geographic area. Palestine will be free. Where in that is there an advocacy for genocide, or an advocacy for the annihilation of Jewish people?
I just think you're incredibly naive. You know, all these people hate Jews, and you are defending their right to shout that on the streets of London. I think that's disgraceful.
I know, because I'm arguing...
Really, you sound like someone from Novara Media, not the IEA.
I believe in freedom for everyone, not just for people that
are there are limits to free speech, Reem. You must accept that there are limits to free speech. We have libel laws in this country. We have anti-hate incitement laws in this country, and it is right that they were enforced, isn't it?
I believe that every individual in this country has the right to freedom of expression so long as they are not inciting violence to other people.
But that's exactly what these people are doing.
No, they are not. There is nothing in that phraseology
when they say that Israel shouldn't exist, when they talk about paragliders that attacked the Jews and they celebrate that, are those free speech?
Saying the statement you can be anti-Zionist and not be anti-Semitic.
Reem, we're going to have to move on now. It's been a very heated debate, but it's been a very difficult week for Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party this week, and I think Darren Grimes might be making it an even more difficult week for them. It is high time for grime time.
Now, in the recent by-elections of Tamworth and Mid-Bedfordshire, the Conservatives witnessed a Staffordshire setback thanks to two-thirds of their 2019 voters deciding to play truant. In Tamworth, Labour secured a victory on a 35.87% turnout, with a mere 811 votes more than their previous outing. Mid-Bedfordshire echoed this narrative, with a dwindled turnout and Labour celebrating despite bagging 156 fewer votes than in 2019. Now, Sir Keir Starmer, he's not exactly the Pied Piper, is he? Yet Tories are nowhere to be seen rallying behind a man so power-hungry that he twice championed Jezza Corbyn, a man with a soft spot for Britain's foes, all to thwart our Brexit mandate. I remember the 2019 shift when my birthplace of Concert swapped its Labour red for Tory blue. Well, had hope, right? We had so much promise. But alas, you fast forward to today as you shiver in your abode, eyeballing up your soaring energy bill, courtesy of Theresa May and Bozer Johnson, their green escapades, or their net stupid as I call it, and voting seems somewhat futile for some people at home. With the NHS and your dentist appointments rescheduled more than a footy match, identity politics devouring the nation and the unity of it, and our shores being a hotspot for illegal migrants and those chanting sinister slogans in our cities. I understand your disillusionment. And let's not overlook the tax fiasco. Highest rates in decades, with nary a clue on where it's all funneled. Yet here we are, expected to march to the polls. It's a bleak forecast for the Prime Minister. If I was him, I'd be tempted to stay in the Middle East. He doesn't shake off the timidity, the bold moves we saw when he diluted Boris Johnson's green zealotry, or when he thwarted Nicky Sturgeon's perilous self-ID gender laws. They need a comeback. That was good stuff. With no luxury of time for dilly-dally on A-level reforms or banning ciggies for kids, debating so-called conversion therapy. These are all luxuries we don't have. It's a snail's race when we need a sprint to salvage what's left of our Great Britain. The era of slow and steady is over, and it's high time our leaders got the sodden memo, frankly. Now, Benjamin Butterworth, that must be music to your ears, actually. You must agree with every word.
I swear you get more Geordie every week. That's another thing Look, I mean, full credit to you. You know, you looked at the two of the three biggest swings from Tory to Labour in post-war Britain and still managed to claim that it was a bad night for Labour.
Well, the turnout was lower than most parties that you throw.
Very good. But look, you know, the fact is that Labour's vote went up significantly, and both of those seats are not seats that the Labour Party needs to win to put Keir Starmer in Downing Street. If you were to have an equal swing across the country, then every seat with a seat with a Tory majority of 15,000 would have to go Labour. Mid Beds had a 25,000 and Tamworth was 21,000. So this says that the Tories are leaving government, that they don't have a hope in hell. So actually, I'm quite glad that you say things like that and that you dig your heels in and ignore reality, because that just guarantees Keir Starmer will be a number 10.
So, Leo, are you following Sir Keir Starmer like a sort of lamb to the slaughter?
Well, people have described it as he's trying to carry a Ming vase without breaking it.
Yes.
You know, he's trying not to do anything radical. But actually, what we sort of need from him is to know what he stands for. At the moment, he seems to... You ask him what he stands for, and he's like, leave it with me. He goes and speaks to various focus groups and comes back and says, you know, I like whatever you like. And we really need to know, you know, what are his policies and what does he think? Because at the moment, he's not going to win the election. The Tories are going to lose it.
So do you think his only policy right now is not being the Conservative Party?
Exactly.
Can I just say that you often get that from people on the left of the Labour Party who seem to think that anyone, i.e. Jeremy Corbyn, would win when they wouldn't. Look, only 3 people have won a general election for the Labour Party. Only happened 3 times, and Keir Starmer is on course to be the 4th. So this idea that he's not really impressive, that he's not really changed anyone's mind, is complete nonsense. Because if it were that easy for Labour to win elections, they would have had more than 3 leaders do it.
Well, he should be making me want to vote for him, and he's
I'm not sure I'd want him in the Labour Party.
The interesting thing, Albie, for the Labour Party, you're talking a little bit about it later, so I don't want to spoil what you're going to say. But do you think the civil war within Labour that's been promoted in the press recently, where actually a lot of the Muslim vote are unhappy with its stance on Israel, is this going to become a problem for the Labour Party moving forward? And you're going to be addressing that.
Look, I think it's already a problem for the Labour Party. We've already seen we have seen Muslim councillors across the country resigning because of Keir Starmer's position on Israel-Palestine. But actually, with the cohort of people who he needs to win over at the next general election, i.e. Red Wall 2019 Tory voters, his position on the Israel-Palestine conflict is actually going to be quite helpful for that group of people who tend to be more pro-Israel. So that could actually be a net benefit for him. But when it comes to the Conservatives, you know, as a Conservative myself, it's been a very disappointing week for us. The public are not buying what we're selling. And quite frankly, Rishi Sunak needs to get his act together, get the government's act together and start delivering on the 5 pledges that we pledged for the next general election. At the moment, it doesn't look like any of those are going to be achieved.
Reem?
I've got to say, I think Benjamin is somewhat overexcited by the prospect of these by-elections. I do think that the Conservative Party, again, haven't had any kind of ideological direction. I also think, Darren, you make a very important point here, that actually, you know, even the Guardian front page today admitted that these swings last night were not very big. They were primarily as a result of Tory voters staying home rather than...
They were the second and third biggest swing in post-war history. What are you on about?
So the Conservatives, it was on the Guardian front page that even admitted that the majorities were about 1,000. The swing was big, sorry, but the majority was very, very small.
Yeah, but that's because far fewer people voted, and that always happens in by-elections.
Exactly. So turnout was very low. Tory voters stayed home rather than Tory voters voting Labour, is my point. Ultimately, the Conservatives haven't been able to deliver on their 5 pledges. We've got the highest tax burden since the Second World War. We've got huge amounts of illegal migrants entering the country without any kind of basis for those individuals for where they're going to live or the infrastructure. But ultimately, the Labour Party haven't been able to convince those voters to return to their party.
But, I mean, you're a policy wonk, not to sound offensive. Do you actually know what the Labour Party's policies are?
Well, I know as much as you do, Darren, and I cannot tell you exactly what the Labour Party want to do. What I will say is the Labour Party have won over on housing. They've promised to build, I think it was 1.5 million houses. The Conservative Party failed on the housing crisis, and at least we're hearing some kind of direction on what I think is the largest political problem facing young people in this country today.
Okie doke. Right. Now, folks, still to come tonight, Leo's going to be assessing Greta Thunberg's latest antics. A glowing review incoming, I've no doubt. And Albie will be pitching a national integration policy. But next in the programme, experts are calling for shorter prison sentences to be axed in favour of community punishments. But who needs experts when you've got Benjamin Butterworth? He'll be giving his verdict on those plans. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time! Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Cheers for your company and for your emails about tonight's topics. Sherry's written in, and Sherry, you've made me want a glass of sherry. There's a clear difference between people protesting the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and actively supporting Hamas. It's very dangerous to paint everyone out marching in London today with the same brush. Now, Malcolm says, free speech is OK, but watch out if people start listening. Now, that's a good point, is it not? Because if people start listening to some of the chants out there, then we're all up... I was going to say something quite fruity. A certain creek without a paddle.
Well, indeed, but I think it's that earlier point, right? The differences between support for Hamas and support for freedom.
Susan, though, has written in, and Susan, you can expect your fiver from Benjamin in the post. She says Benjamin's answer to the free speech question is the most sensible thing he's ever said. And I don't usually agree with him.
Well, don't get used to it, but thank you.
Susan, your mum.
Yeah, exactly. She definitely wouldn't think I'd said something sensible.
Right, folks, it's time for our next debate. Up next, it is Benjamin, and he's going to give us his verdict on plans to ditch shorter prison sentences. It's time for Benjamin's bugbear.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's time to abolish short prison sentences. The kind of sentences that are a couple of months or even a couple of weeks. These are handed out to people who commit crimes like shoplifting or non-violent minor incidents. Now, those crimes can have a very real effect on society around them. But sending someone to prison for a matter of weeks who's been doing petty theft, well, not only does that cost a fortune, but what it also does is socialise often young petty criminals into serious, organised, hardline criminals. And it also often takes away their chances of getting a proper job and earning an honest wage. So that's why I think short sentences should be dropped, because they just don't work. Look at the evidence. The reoffending rate for people that have been to prison for a couple of months as opposed to a couple of years is double. 50% of people on short sentences go on to re-offend. So clearly it's not teaching them a lesson. What I say is that we should spend that money on having people that can rehabilitate these people, better probation officers, to try and integrate them back into the community. Because short sentences don't work. Let's spend the money on rehabilitation for petty thieves and not integrating them into hardline criminals for a couple of months behind bars. Now, Darren, what do you think?
I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. You are basically saying that you want to turn this country into San Francisco, a Democrat-ran hellhole, which is crime-ridden, and in which there is lawlessness like you wouldn't believe. You basically want us to be a lawless hellhole in which people can shoplift. Rehabilitation, pull the other one. They've got about as much chance of that as, you know, someone who is totally and utterly addicted to drugs. It is a very, very hard ask. You think that getting someone in to deal with these people on God knows how much in the way of taxpayer cash is going to sort them out? The only reason you want these people off on the streets is so they can vote Labour.
What a load of nonsense. Look, 50% of people who go into prison go on to re-offend. So this system means that there are more crimes because they're not getting out of those habits, and they meet people who often drag them further into that world. So that doesn't work. And when you talk about lawless hellhole, I mean, America is a terrible example because they incarcerate more people than any democracy in the world, and they have very high crime rates. So clearly, there isn't a great correlation. We have twice as many people in prisons in this country today than we did 30 years ago, and yet petty crime is on the rise.
But Benjamin, I've got to say, I mean, I know you don't like short sentences because your monologues always go on too long for me, but if you are saying that 50% of people who go into prison with a short sentence re-offend, that means 50% don't. For 50%, it totally works 100% of the time.
I mean, that's a very expensive way to do things. And one of the problems we have with our prison system is that we don't prepare them to leave prison. So you have somebody who's probably turned to crime because they don't know any better, you know, they've not been taught the kind of boundaries and morals that we should have. It's not guessing at all. These are absolutely what people in the sector say.
They probably didn't know any better. I'm pretty sure.
Well, clearly they don't know any better.
Do know better. I think actually you're insulting the criminals by saying that they're not intelligent enough to know what they're doing. Many of them do. Ultimately, let's think about the reality of this. If we completely abolish less than a year prison sentences, that means you're taking away that choice from judges. It also means that there will be crimes that did have a prison sentence that now won't. When you're taking away that crime, you're taking away that punishment, you're effectively saying that those crimes are completely OK to happen.
But you're not at all, because they should have community punishments that make them actually change the behaviour. The goal of prison is to get someone to learn the lesson and to change their behaviour. Well, if they're not changing their behaviour, you're wasting your money.
I think the goal of prison can, in some cases, be to change behaviour, but it can also just be to remove problematic people from society, and so that everyone else can just live their lives.
And punish them.
I think there is an important point that maybe you're missing, which is at the moment we don't have enough space in prisons. I think there's only about 650.
Under the Tories, we don't even lock up rapists.
I'm making the point for you, Benjamin, and that we don't lock up even serious criminals. So what Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, is proposing is that we reduce the number of sentences that we give out for petty crime so that we can lock up actual criminals. I actually think we need to just be building more prisons and locking up people for a longer amount of time, because actually I want to see less criminals.
Can I just say, this is a ridiculous thing to say, because one of the reasons why someone is going to return to stealing is because they don't have another option available to them. They probably don't have a serious education. Once they've been to prison, it makes it even harder to get a job. If you're cornering them to keep behaving like that, you're not benefiting society. You're just feeling good about being mean.
Infantilising, patronising nonsense. They don't have any other option. Don't put things that aren't yours in your pockets. That's an option.
I mean, Darren, it's not only theft. We're talking about burglary. We're talking about people that are going to enter somebody else's home and take things from them. I do not think that these people should be walking the streets without having been to prison.
So, for example, Benjamin, you unfortunately were mugged in London. Should he have not gone to prison?
Well, that was a violent incident because they strangled me and threatened me with a knife. So I don't think violent incidents would be in this, because that's more serious. But I just think this idea that that you can simply throw someone in a cage for a few weeks and then expect that they're going to be a different person when they come out is clearly preposterous. And it's a very expensive way to do things.
It works 50% of the time. So then if you arrest somebody again, it's 75% of the time. And then again, it's, you know...
But, you know, our reoffending rates in this country are much higher than many of our European counterparts. So clearly this
We've got stuff worth nicking.
Right. Every time someone does another offence, that's, what, 40 grand a year for them to be in prison?
Hey, we could have went on and on with that one, but unfortunately we haven't the time. Now, still ahead, Leo is going to continue with his shameless adoration of Greta Thunberg, and we're going to answer all your questions in Flummox the Five, so keep emailing them in. But next, some people say multiculturalism has failed. Albie's got a plan to prove them wrong. You're with the Saturday Five, live on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. As always, cheers very much for all of your emails. Now, Chris has written in, and Chris says, it's worth remembering that the Reform Party got more votes than the Conservatives and Lib Dems. Aren't they the ones to watch? They got more than the Lib Dems, I think, in one of them in the by-elections, but not more than the Conservatives.
Not more than the Conservatives. What was interesting about Reform UK is that in both seats, they got more votes than the Labour majority. So it was suggested if Reform weren't standing, maybe the Conservatives would have won those seats.
OK, so Richard Tice has got the Conservatives dancing in the heat. Now, Rob says, oh, well, let everyone out of prison. If it's cruel to have illegal migrants on a barge, then it follows that we should not lock up anyone in a prison. He's given Benjamin Butterworth some ideas. I'm sure they're all jolly nice and have just been misunderstood. And probably misgendered as well, Rob, who knows? But thank you very much for your emails. It's time for our next debate now, though. Up next, it's Albion. He's given himself a pretty hard task here. Amidst rising community tensions and claims that multiculturalism has failed, he's going to pitch a national integration policy. It's time for Albie's argument.
Absolutely right. Look, it's become abundantly clear to me that immigration without integration has been a complete disaster for this country. Whether or not that is the parallel societies that we've seen emerge in our great northern towns like Rochdale, Oldham and Rotherham, or if it's the community tensions that we've seen inflame after the awful war that we're seeing in Israel and Palestine. We're seeing it spill out onto the streets of London, Manchester and Birmingham. It's simply unsustainable for us to continue on this path without a specific government policy on integration. I was pretty horrified to learn that there is not a UK-wide national integration policy. And we've seen these huge levels of migration after the Blair government and continued under subsequent Conservative governments, but no one has stood still and thought, how do we integrate all of these people? How do we make sure everyone rubs along and we have a cohesive, safe and prosperous society? That's why I'm calling for a government focus on integration. Now, what could this look like? I think for prospective immigrants and asylum seekers, at the very least, we should be expecting them to have a basic level of English. I think that all employers that sponsor visas for international workers should have the duty to make sure that their employees are trained in British integration. I think that when people are applying for visas into the United Kingdom, there should be a values-based psychometric test to ensure that the people who are coming to our countries adhere and want to adhere to British values, and we should not be scared of rejecting those who fail. For the rest of society, because it's not just a problem with new immigrants, it's a problem with immigrant communities who've been here for decades, we need to be looking at a statutory duty on local authorities to promote integration and not just social cohesion. And I also think we need a national citizenship service with the express mission of integrating our races, cultures, religions and classes. Now, these are just some ideas about integration for this country. Other people will have other ideas. It's not going to be an easy task. It is going to take time. But there's one thing I am certain of, and that is that multiculturalism will fail unless we have a focus on integration. Darren, I know that you are very passionate about reducing the level of immigration in this country. And I think, look, I agree, immigration has been too high in this country for too long. 1.2 million net migration is not a sustainable number of people, and I'm pro-immigration saying that. But when it comes to the issue of integrating people, are you not shocked that the Conservatives over the last 13 years have not thought, well, maybe we should make a national integration policy?
Do you know what? It reminds me, everything that's just been said there reminds me of when I went up to cover the Batley and Spen by-election, and George Galloway stood in that by-election. And it was the most divisive, race-baiting, religion, foreign conflicts, trying to evoke all of these things. It was genuinely horrible to see, and all the campaigning material was, I just thought, are we campaigning in a part of Britain or in a part of somewhere else? This just feels utterly absurd. So I think you've got an unenviable task on your hands for this national, what was it, NCS, the National
Citizenship Service.
Citizenship Service. Perhaps I do worry about that, but my answer would be, if you stand on Britain's streets like we've seen people do today and shout jihad, 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 I have no idea if I can do that, if that's Ofcom compliant, but if you do that, get out, right? Why are you here? Leave.
But Reem, don't we also have to give people something to buy into? So it's not just a stick, it's also a carrot. We've got to say to people who come to this country, like my grandparents
don't come
did,
here if you don't want to
like
buy
your
into it.
ancestors, like your ancestors will have done, even though it's probably not that far back to use the word ancestor, but you know what I mean. We've got to give people something positive to buy into, and at the moment we don't have that. Why?
Yes, and what I will say is that there is a huge difference between the generations that have come to this country. So my grandparents came to this country from North Africa, and they came to this country, they felt honoured to come to this country, to work, to contribute to the British economy and to contribute to the labour market. Now, there are far too many people that come to this country now and feel as though it is their right to do so. It is their right to take taxpayer money from other taxpayers through the benefit system. It is their right to enter into social housing. And I think that there is a huge difference there. Now, I would argue the welfare state acts as a magnet for many of those types of migrants. People don't come to this country anymore the way my grandparents did and think it's an honour to do so, to contribute. They come here because they think they have the right to do so.
Well, Benjamin, I actually met a fellow gay man last weekend who told me that he moved here.
What?
From... He said that he moved here from Greece because he wanted to live in a more diverse and tolerant and open society. And he actually did feel honoured to come to this country. So there are still people that move here, I think, for the right reasons. But how is it that we integrate them better into British society?
I mean, look, first of all, I don't accept what Reem just said. You know, people aren't automatically entitled to the benefits that you or I might be when they get to this country. And immigrants earn more and pay more tax than the average British-born citizen. So if you took them out of the scenario, our economy, our public finances would be in a much worse position. You know, I went to, as Albie did, the London School of Economics, where...
I also went there.
Oh, there we go.
Three LSE alumni on the panel.
And so, as you'll know, 70% of students at that university...
It's 80% when I was there.
...are from countries around the world. It has as many nationalities as the United Nations. And it works fantastically. For me, it's an example of Britain at its best, because you have the talent from around the world coming here. And I think the idea that multiculturalism has failed is wrong, because we have issues, but Britain is a very successful multicultural nation. The kind of problems we have compared to France or America or, heaven forbid, the Middle East, they're nothing like the scale that very similar countries have.
But let's be honest, there is a big difference between a bunch of LSE students that have received top grades and are the kids of diplomats and mass immigration that we're seeing at the moment. There is a big difference.
I'd say one thing, which is that I think you should have to learn English. You know, I remember when I've gone round Tower Hamlets, and you have women in particular there who have lived here for many decades and they've never learned the language and they don't have agency to look after themselves and they're not integrated.
Leo,
and I think that should change.
Leo,
what's your view on this
briefly?
No, I think Reem covered it. I mean, when you look at LSE, you're not taking a representative sample at all. It's ridiculous. And for multiculturalism, for you to say it's been a success, what about grooming gangs? What about terrorist bombings? What about the riots we're seeing today?
Well, most people that have been grooming, that have been convicted in this country, are white British men. So isn't it your fault?
It's an 87% white country, or at least it was last time somebody checked. I should imagine with the people coming across the channel unchecked, that's changed. But so you'd expect over 50% of the grooming gangs or the organised paedophiles to be white in an 87% white country. We're talking about proportionality. You've got a tiny proportion of the population vastly overrepresented in this most horrific crime. And I think it's sick that the left has covered it up. And that's why the left lost me, to be honest.
I think Britain is a lot richer for its multiculturalism.
Right, on that bombshell, still ahead, we're going to be giving our verdict about those stunning by-election results last week and considering Rishi Sunak's potential ban on conversion therapy in more detail. But next up, it's our regular meeting of the Greta Thunberg Appreciation Society. President Leo Kearse is with us. You'll hear more from him imminently. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, Royal Mail is now Royal Fail. Cheques missing in the post, birthday cards disappearing, waiting days on end for that important invoice. Postman Pat would be spinning in his grave. In my take at 10, comedy writer Richard Curtis apologises for fat jokes and his un-PC movies. Remember the good old days when films were allowed to be funny? Plus, Mark meets the pundits and tomorrow's papers. We're live at 9.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Your emails have been flying in as ever. Cheers very much for them. Tucker has written in. I wonder if it's Tucker Carlson. He says, oh, it's definitely not. It's not multiculturalism that's gone wrong. Multiculturalism has worked, says Tucker. Britain's a multicultural country. What has gone wrong, seriously wrong, is integration. That has really failed. Antonio says, don't forget, prison is where criminals are locked up, so society is safe from them. I know, I say we should put Benjamin Butterworth in one. Maybe that's the answer for this. Now, though, it's time for our next debate, and that isn't on whether or not Benjamin Butterworth should be in prison. It's on the lovable youngster, Greta Thunberg, who we're all great fans of. Now, she's had her say on the conflict in the Middle East, because obviously the intersection between climate and Gaza, they're one and the same. Leo Kearse is very unimpressed, though, and I wonder why. It's time for Leo's lament.
So yeah, as Darren said, the eternally irritating doom unit Greta Thunberg came out in favour of Islamic Jihad this week. I mean, I'm not surprised. Everybody under 25 seems to have as well. But why is she supporting Hamas? Why is she siding with these terrorists? I mean, she doesn't like it when we burn coal, but somehow Hamas burning rocket fuel, burning people's homes, even burning civilians themselves is fine by her. She posted an image on social media with her holding up a sign saying, I think it said, Free Gaza, or I stand with Gaza, although she is sitting down. And interestingly, in the corner, you can see there a blue octopus, the significance of which was seized upon by someone as an example of a Nazi dog whistle. It echoes Nazi propaganda that showed a blue octopus taking over the world, supposedly standing for the Jewish people. But what I want to know is, why is Greta Thunberg taking sides on divisive issues such as the conflict in Israel and the trans debate? Her core issue should be climate change. So she shouldn't be pushing away people who could be on her side. Israelis buy cars, Jews buy cars, civilized people buy cars. So don't alienate those people. Don't push them away. It really just shows that she's not interested in saving the climate at all. She's just a desperate, fame-hungry grifter, like so many other people on the left. Sorry, Benjamin. And, and she's just trying to reinvent herself like Madonna. But like Madonna, she needs to go out for retirement now. So Greta, sling your hook.
Well, well, well. Benjamin, you've got to have right to reply to being a fame-hungry grifter.
Yeah, I'm not desperate, but the rest is true. I mean, look, I don't agree with Greta Thunberg on this, and I can't stand people that talk of free Palestine. Well, the people that run Palestine don't believe in any sort of freedom. So, I take issue with the conclusion she comes to. But she is someone who has built one of the biggest platforms of anybody in the world. She's incredibly influential. Tens of millions of young people listen to her, and I think it's perfectly reasonable that she'd have an opinion on lots of things. There's plenty of stuff that you lecture about that you know nothing of. I hardly think you can pull Greta up
I think
on that.
I know more about most things than a 14-year-old child.
She's like 20 now, I think.
Well, she still looks about 14. I don't know what's going on. And honestly, there must be so many scientists, so many climate change scientists who've slaved away. They've put the hours in. They've got the PhDs. And they could be giving these lectures, and instead, this little girl.
But Leo, surely you don't think only experts on topics should have opinions on certain topics? Otherwise, what are we all doing here talking about things that we actually don't?
Well, you think it's a ridiculous idea for us to turn to experts for what they think instead of asking a child?
Your inference is that no one other than experts on a topic should have an opinion.
My point is that if she cares about climate change, she shouldn't be supporting, taking sides on divisive issues that will push away people. Like, if I was a civilized person, which I'm not, then I'd be saying, well, she's supporting Hamas. I'm not gonna listen to her on climate change. You know what? I'm gonna get a 5-litre car. I'm gonna do donuts in the car park. Screw you, Greta.
It sounds as though you want to be Greta Thunberg's campaign manager because you're giving her all this advice about what she should and shouldn't do. But I don't think you're arguing that she shouldn't have these opinions at all. You're saying that if she was, a better campaigner, or if she was a little bit more intelligent in the way that she strategized.
If she cared about climate change,
she would only talk about climate change. I mean, I care about lots of things, and I don't just talk about the things I care about. I talk about things.
Yeah, but you're not a single-issue campaigner.
No, that's true, but I don't think she has to be.
Well.
But, if you did actually genuinely believe with every fibre of your being, which she professes to do, she's been arrested quite a few times in the name of climate alarmism.
It's those short sentences not working.
She's the reoffender. Yes, indeed. She's been saying things like, the world is about to end if we don't take action right now. Well, I'm sorry, love, but I don't think firing rockets into Israel every bloody hour of the day is doing much for the world.
Let's also be very clear. Her saying free Palestine or stand with Gaza does not necessarily mean she supports Hamas. And I think we've got to be very clear about this. You can say free Palestine, pro-Palestine.
Reem, you're being naive. Where was her outrage? Why didn't she say I stand with Israel when the civilians were being killed? But then all of a sudden she's standing with Gaza. She's taking a side, and she's taking the side of barbarianism and terror.
I don't know if she did say any condemnation to Hamas, or if she did say I stand with the Israeli people that have been massacred by the terrorist organisation that is Hamas. But let's be very clear. You can say I support the Palestinian people without supporting Hamas.
I think the bigger concern is people who are around Greta's age generally seem to be more pro-Palestine than pro-Israel in the West. And what does that mean for future Western support of the state of Israel?
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, it is a really important point that how do we actually stop young people from being as indoctrinated as Greta?
Oh, that's so patronising. People, just because they don't come to the same far-right conclusions that you come to, doesn't mean that they don't know what they're talking about.
I've got to wrap up, fortunately. Right, loads more to come tonight on the show, though, including our verdict on a possible new leader for the Tories. Who could it be? It's not Leo Kearse. Is Rishi Sunak's ban ban on conversion therapy a good idea? Have men forgotten how to dress? And we answer all your questions in Flummox of 5. Keep your emails coming in. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night. Welcome back to the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albion and Corner, Reem Ibrahim, Benjamin Butterworth and Leo Curse. Lots more to come on the show. We're going to be spinning through some of the big stories of the week in Bunch of 5, and we'll have a great guest here to discuss Rishi Sunak's plans to ban conversion therapy. Now, we're going to be asking if men have forgotten how to dress smartly, because Leo's showing we're all up tonight, and we'll pay a tribute to the footballing legend Bobby Charlton, who sadly passed away today. Now, folks, do not forget about your emails. I want them coming in, because you need to flummox the 5, and we're easily flummoxed, I'll tell you that much. Anything you want us to answer, we'll do it towards the end of the show. It's guaranteed to be non-scripted, non-prepared and nonsensical, just like a Benjamin Butterworth column. Hit us with absolutely everything you've got. gbviews@gbnews.com. But before the chaos restarts, let's get your latest news with the lovely Lisa Hartle.
I'm Lisa Houghton in the GB Newsroom. The UK is calling on Israel to show military restraint in its war with Hamas. Addressing a peace summit in Egypt, the Foreign Secretary said he's spoken to the Israeli government about its duty to respect international law and the importance of preserving civilian lives. James Cleverly also told the conference efforts need to be made to prevent an escalation in violence.
We have a duty to work together to prevent instability from engulfing the region and claiming yet more lives. We must work together to prevent the tragic situation in Gaza becoming a regional conflict, because that is exactly what Hamas wants.
Trucks carrying humanitarian aid have now reached southern Gaza. It's after the Rafah crossing on the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. Israel imposed a blockade preventing the delivery of food, water and fuel after the Hamas terror attack. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has vowed to continue to fight until all hostages being held by Hamas are freed. It's after 2 American citizens, Judith Raanan and her 17-year-old daughter Natalie, were released yesterday. Hamas says the decision was made on humanitarian grounds. It's believed more than 200 people are still being held by the terrorist group. Pro-Palestinian protests have been taking place in cities across the UK. They're calling for an end to the conflict in the Middle East and demanding the government stop supporting Israel's actions. Police estimate up to 100,000 people took part in a protest through central London. In Salford, a group marched to the BBC's Media City headquarters over the corporation's reporting of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Around 2,000 people also took to the streets in Belfast. Rallies were also held in Birmingham and Cardiff. In other news, tributes are being paid to Sir Bobby Charlton, who has died at the age of 86. He was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966 and a club legend at Manchester United. His family said he'd passed away peacefully in the early hours of this morning. In a statement, United described Sir Bobby as one of the most beloved players in the history of the club, and the Prince of Wales, who's president of the FA, called him a true great who will be remembered forever. The Environment Agency is warning floods are likely to continue near major rivers in England until Tuesday. Storm Babette is dumping heavy rain in parts of the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. Nottinghamshire County Council has declared a major incident with a severe flood warning in Derby. The City Council says it's experiencing the highest recorded water levels of the River Derwent, with roads flooded across the city. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car and digital radio, and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to the Saturday 5.
Thanks, Lisa. Now it's Saturday night, folks, and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, and I can promise that this next hour is going to be even more lively than the first. We're going to climax with Flummox the 5, so please keep your questions flying in. But now, though, it's time for Bunch of 5, where we spin through 5 of the week's big stories and give our always well-considered and thoughtful opinions. Now, GB News presenter Nigel Farage set tongues a-wagging when he suggested he could be leading the Conservative Party by 2026. Even Benjamin Butterworth said, I'd vote for him. The former Brexit Party leader was a prominent fixture at the Conservative Party conference earlier this month, but later told Politico he made the comment in jest. But bearing in mind this week's by-election results, is Nigel Farage's Tory leader really such an unlikely scenario? Albeit if the Tories are heading for opposition, do you reckon, Nigel, would you be happy to serve under a Nigel Farage-led Conservative Party?
Look, I think Nigel and I, it's quite obvious to everyone watching that we're quite different people on the right wing of British politics. And look, I've got a lot of respect for Nigel. I think what he did with Brexit was really quite impressive. But also, we've got to remember that he was deemed too toxic to front the official Vote Leave campaign. So the idea that the same person could front the most successful British political party in history, I think is for the birds. I think he's certainly had a very influential impact on the Conservative Party, but I think I would be very surprised if he ever became the leader of the Conservative Party.
Benjamin, you're very excited about the prospect.
Yeah, you better have some libel lawyers after blaming us for Farage. Look, it's obviously never going to happen. I think there'd be the most amazing internal war in the Tories if there was a serious move to do it. I think even people that share Farage-style politics wouldn't want him in the Tories because they know he'd beat them in a leadership election with Tory members, I suspect. But look, his whole career has been about shouting at problems, not solving problems. You know, he was very influential on persuading people to Brexit, but he never did anything. He never had any answers. And so I can't imagine this bloke that earns a very nice income and has a very nice life is going to want to do the actual hard graft of solving problems by being Prime Minister or Tory leader.
I mean, Leo, I'm not just saying this because we work with him, but like everything from the debanking crisis to, of course, his Euroscepticism, which became very popular with the whole country, of course, or 52% of it at least. That is a sign of a successful politician, is it not?
Yeah, you can see where trends are going, and I mean, it might take a bit longer than 2026 for his, you know, where he's saying the country is going to actually get there, and for people to be sick of where it's going. But it could happen. And also the Conservative Party, they've really sort of been lured into the trap of becoming a really centrist, quite a large, quite socialist government. And it's like the great comedian Jeff Norcott says, you know, people say to him, do you regret voting Conservative? And he says, no, but I regret not getting a Conservative Party.
Reem, you agree with those sentiments?
I do also really love Nigel. I think he's a fantastic communicator. I think he really does depict what it means to be pro-Brexit but also pro-free trade. And he, you know, really his definition of what Brexit should have looked like isn't the one that we have at the moment. Ultimately, the Conservative government delivered on Brexit. They took back control, but we've implemented policies that have negatively impacted the British economy. I will say, Albie makes a very good point. The Vote Leave campaign deemed Nigel too toxic to lead it, to be the face of it. And the reason why is because they thought he was too radical. The people that did already believe in Brexit had believed in that. And actually, in order to get the centre people on side, the centrists on side, Nigel would have been too toxic for that kind of environment.
All right, we'll let the viewers decide, because earlier we asked if you would vote for Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party in the next general election. Now, 42% of you said yes. 58% of you said no. There goes Albie's prospects of being the next Conservative MP.
That's closer than I thought it was.
Do you think so?
Are you
quite surprised by that?
I would have thought it would have been a lot higher for no than yes.
Well, that's not a ringing endorsement, is it? Now, next up, folks, the closure of the only bank left on Oakham High Street has made residents fearful that they'll no longer be able to access notes and coins. That's another issue that Nigel Farage has been good on. Rutland locals are largely retired and favour independent retailers and cafes preferring to pay with cash. But axing the final local bank might mean businesses have to stop accepting cash altogether. So does the closure of high street banks mean that a cashless future is inevitable? Now, Benjamin, plenty of cash in your bank account. There's another libelous statement. But do you ever carry any around?
No, I don't even, you know, a long time since I've even had a wallet that would take coins, for example. I don't know where you'd even get such a thing. But look, you know, I think this thing of trying to thrust cash back into people's lives doesn't make sense, because the reason that people use their cards, and people of all ages use a card to pay with things, or someone, you know, younger people often use Apple Pay on their phones and equivalent versions, is because it's easier and it's safer for a lot of these cafes to not have all the cash in the store.
There's no way. It's easier to set up an online account, remember all the passwords, know what all these things are doing.
I'm going to confess, and here is where friends, and I do have friends, think I'm crazy. I only got internet banking last week, aged 31.
No.
What?
And I always gone into the bank physically to do it, and I have to say, now I've got it, I mean, I really don't know what I was doing before. It's brilliant, and so, you know, if you can use it, it does make more sense.
But isn't it about allowing individuals to have that choice? I mean, many older people enjoy going to the bank. I know many people in my family, the only time they really have any kind of human interaction is when they go to the bank and when they go to meet people, and they enjoy that human interaction. You've made the choice.
I'm willing to take some rich old people to the bank if they want.
Okay, well, I'm sure you'd enjoy that.
I'll selflessly do that.
Selflessly. Well, yeah, you've made the choice to switch to online banking, and that's great for you. And I do agree that it's much more efficient for many people, but equally there are many people that don't wish to do that, and many people are worried about the government tracking where they're spending.
Well, exactly. That's a good point, Leo. There are a lot of viewers who say, hang on a minute, you know, I don't trust the government and all the rest of it after what happened during the years of lockdown.
Yeah.
If we hand them control over all of our money, are they going to be able to say, we can't just debank you, we're going to ensure that you can't have any money to spend whatsoever?
Exactly. We're seeing digital currencies being mooted that would...
CBDCs.
Yeah, which are horrific. It means that, you know, you get given money, you can only spend it in, say, a certain geographical area within a certain time limit. It's sort of like a record voucher.
Where's that?
It's absolutely rubbish.
It's happening in Britain.
This will be coming, Albie. It's happening in China. And if you want to know what your future looks like, look at China.
Well, I don't think we're actually going to end up like China. Look, I'm with Benjamin on this. It is easier to do online banking. It is very easy to use your digital bank card on your Apple Pay. I do still think there is a place for cash. Because if we do look at older people, I was visiting my grandmother just outside of Manchester after a Conservative Party conference. She was paying for everything in cash. There's no way she's going to start using an iPhone and using Apple Pay.
And it's not just old people. It's also, I mean, Tory politicians. What are they going to snort their cocaine through?
Well, you know, that is a very gallant concern that you have for Tory politicians who do not snort cocaine.
How kind of you.
Right, anyway, a recent RAC survey has found that a third of drivers have been forced to swerve lanes to avoid a pothole in the past year. The findings also highlight a growing dissatisfaction with Britain's roads, with 49% saying it was their top concern, the highest figure since the annual survey began in 2015. So why are Britain's roads falling apart and failing motorists? Leo, do you still take your Ferrari out for a spin? Are you worried about potholes?
I don't think I'd invest in a Ferrari with the roads, the state they're in. Honestly, you drive around Glasgow, you'd think you're driving across a rutted field. It's like being in war-torn Somalia, just freshly shelled. You go down one pothole, you're not sure if you're going to come out the other side. It's ridiculous. No wonder everybody's getting 4x4s. You can't, and it's only going to get worse with people getting electric cars because the battery's so heavy, or it is until it blows up, obviously.
4x4s, is that Nicola Sturgeon's camper van?
Yeah.
Albie, are you worried? I mean, do you get people talking to you in local politics and all the rest of it about potholes?
Absolutely. I mean, as a cyclist, I know everyone hates cyclists,
dear.
but I do cycle a lot. If you cycle over a pothole, like, you can ruin your bike. You could fall over and really hurt yourself.
Well, that's a shame. I want...
But seriously, it's a serious issue. Cyclists get seriously injured by potholes. Horses also don't like it when they're those police horses. And, of course, people's cars can get damaged from potholes as well. But the question is are councils being given enough money or raising enough money from council tax in order to fix this? Because this is actually a local government problem, not a national government problem, and we don't talk about local government enough.
That's very true, and I think it's a very important point. National government is not responsible for potholes, it's the local councils that are. I would argue if we were to reform the tax system and make local councils responsible for raising their own revenue, this could actually come some way in solving the housing crisis because councils will be incentivised to want more taxpayers in their council to raise more money. But equally, it would mean that they're responsible for potholes and they're actually actively being engaged with taxpayers like that. Because I'm sure you'll be aware, no matter how many times people complain about potholes, it doesn't really make a difference.
Well, hang on, didn't Margaret Thatcher try something like that with the poll tax?
Yes,
that
but
didn't go very well.
The poll tax is slightly different because it means that every individual is taxed the same, no matter what the value of their house is. But actually, what this does is it means that local councils are incentivised to try and engage with more taxpayers, and they're just more accountable to them.
On potholes, one of the shocking things that I remember from the coronation, I don't know if any of you saw, but they actually had to fill the potholes on Pall Mall and on the procession route with sand to ensure that the horses wouldn't fall into it.
The Labour council,
this is...
No, but at the time it was
absurd.
a Conservative... Westminster was a Conservative council.
Whoever was in charge of that council was not doing their job at filling the potholes, and it meant that on one of the most important days in this nation's history, we had to fill up potholes with sand so horses wouldn't fall into it.
Well, Benjamin, on this show, you're good at digging holes, so how do you care about filling them?
Look, I've never driven a car, which is in the interest of everyone who does drive a car. But, this is one of the things that, in the real world, really affects people's quality of life. It's the kind of basic that disrupts. And, tax has never been higher for people of working age right now. And, everything in Britain is broken, so it shouldn't be a surprise that the roads are too. But you do look at the amount of money people pay in tax and think you can't even fill a pothole.
Yes. Yeah, what are they spending the money on? Now, actor Emily Blunt has apologised for a fat-phobic remark made in a video from 2012. It's been circulating again on Twitter this week. Let's have a listen.
The girl who was serving me was enormous. You know, I think she got freebie meals at Chili's.
Nothing wrong with that.
And she comes up and she goes, "Did anyone ever tell you you look a lot like Emily Blunt?"
Jonathan Ross, or was he there taking the moral high ground? What a world. Now, Reem, did those comments really require an apology? And 10 years on, over 10 years on.
12 years.
12 years on. Does that require an apology again?
Absolutely not. And I think that this is where we're starting to wrap people in cotton wool. We're starting to become more sensitive as a society. I mean, I actually don't think you should be apologising for anything with that length of time anyway, unless it's incredibly egregious. But this really is not. And ultimately, these kind of very offhand comments, now as a result of this kind of breakdown in society where people feel as though they need to be protected by everything. I mean, for goodness sake, grow a pair.
Well, Albie, you're probably with Emily Blunt on this, because the way you go on sometimes, you would have fat people in the stocks.
I certainly have fat people doing more exercise and eating less and moving more. Look, I think we can't be scared of calling people fat and to be saying that it is a bad thing to be fat. Nowadays, you have people put fat phobia on the same level as racism or homophobia or sexism. It's not. It is bad to be fat. If someone is fat, it's not a hate crime to describe them as enormous. So I think Emily Blunt being dragged over the coals for something she said 12 years ago, describing someone as enormous and having to apologise for it, is ridiculous.
And I mean, Leo, the truth is here, if Emily Blunt has to apologise for that, then you really are done for one.
Oh, yeah, these offence archaeologists who dig back through somebody's tweets until, like, 12 years ago they find the faint outline of a fat-phobic slur. It's ridiculous. Yeah, they should dig through mine. You just need to go back to yesterday.
And Benjamin, you must have said some offensive things once or twice.
Yeah, I think Emily Blunt is right to apologise.
Oh, come on.
Because it's so incredibly rude. You know, I don't want to see an extremely rich, unbelievably attractive, skinny woman lecturing some minimum wage person who's a bit overweight on national television. I think that's just rude. Fat people know they're fat. They don't need you to make a joke out of it.
And I don't think the woman was saying anything bad to Emily Blunt, right? She was just having a nice conversation with her.
Yeah,
on national British telly, she's called fat.
It was a terrible...
Emily was doing was describing what she saw in that situation.
Yeah, but imagine...
It's similar to that story last week about Fiona Bruce when she said that black bloke over there and she was forced to apologise because of that. And I said, I thought that was ridiculous.
Just describe
that was a black man. That was a fat
It's not actually the Albie show.
Deal?
Can I just say that, imagine you're that person. You might be struggling with your weight, you're having a really hard time, and then someone has just broadcast that insult to millions of people. I think it's gratuitous and just quite rude.
Yes. Well, finally, a climate expert has been fired after turning down a flight and taking 50 days to reach his research destination. Now, Gianluca Grimalda, I'm sorry if I've got your name wrong there, refused a flight and asked to be allowed to travel by other means to reduce his carbon emissions. His route, which included travelling by cargo ship, ferry bus and train, took 50 days. Grimalda was warned that he'd be dismissed if he refused to get on the plane, but said if he had to comply with such demands to keep his job, he'd rather lose it. Now, Benjamin, you've been known to take a few flights once or twice in your life. Would you be, in the name of climate change, be willing to give it all up?
I think, given he works for a climate research group, it's incredible hypocrisy.
Well, you go on about it.
They made him get the flight when he was doing it on ethical grounds. I'm definitely with this guy. I think, I don't quite know how it takes 50 days to get from Papua New Guinea. I don't think it should take that long.
Well,
by
it would have
train.
taken you 50 days to go to the jungle or wherever it was you went.
Well, that was actually, I was quite near Papua New Guinea and it took about 16 hours to get back, so there is a quicker option.
But you were on a flight.
Yes, exactly. You were on a flight.
I was, yes.
Now, Leo, whose side are you on?
Yeah, I mean, this guy, as much as a slam climate activists, the ones that I have some respect for are guys like this. Emma Thompson. Emma Thompson would have flown first class, chucking cigar butts out the window as she went, and telling, the little people that they have to cut their EasyJet flights so she can enjoy her life of luxury. This guy is actually living what he says. Although, I've got to say, cargo ships don't run on zero carbon, cars don't run on zero carbon. He's still burning carbon to get there. Can't he just do the research by Zoom?
All right, we'll have to end it there. Now, still to come, though, have men forgotten how to dress properly? today. As I say, Leo Kearse is showing us the way. And we're going to answer your questions in Flummox the Five, so please keep them coming in. Next up, we'll be discussing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's plans to potentially ban conversion therapy. And we've got a guest along to help us chew the fat on that one. You're with the Saturday Five, live on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Can you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. As always, cheers very much for your emails about tonight's topics. Richard's written in about Leo, and he says Leo is the voice of common sense, not LSE sense. Well, there we are.
Very true.
Rob says most of our knowledge of the Israel-Palestine conflict is spotty at best. However, there needs to be balance. Violence will not end the situation. Stop the violence regardless of who you support. But Philip, I think, has my favourite email, and he says, I love how Benjamin stands his ground and takes the jibes. He's still wrong, but I drink wine on a park bench with him. Now, he is often found on a park bench with a bottle of wine. So...
Well, if you buy the wine, I'll turn up to the bench.
Now, folks, next up, it's our next discussion. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is reportedly set to move forward with a bill to ban conversion therapy in the King's Speech, including for transgender people. Or is he? The Times reported this week that the Prime Minister will include a draft bill in the King's Speech in November, which will make it a criminal offence to attempt to change someone's sexuality and gender identity in England and Wales. But now other reports are claiming that this may not be the case and another U-turn may well be on the way. We've got Jane Ozanne, the chair of the Ban Conversion Therapy Coalition. She spoke to The Eye this week about this topic, and she's has been kind enough to speak to us now. Albie, you're going to speak to Jane. Take it away.
Jane, thank you so much for joining us this evening. You know, I understand that you've actually been through this conversion therapy process, Jane. Maybe talk to us a little bit about what conversion therapy actually is and why the government needs to ban it, in your opinion.
Thanks, Albie. Well, conversion therapy is an umbrella term that can mean any practice that seeks to change, cure, or suppress a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. And it can take any form from, in religious settings, prayers and exorcisms, through to more violent forms of people being physically threatened, to sadly even forced rape, to verbal forms, frankly, anything that has the predetermined purpose, a mindset by the perpetrator that says that who you are is not acceptable, either in our religion or in our culture, and that you must somehow change or suppress who you are. And we know that that causes such really deep mental health problems, to the point that the level of attempted suicide and completed suicide is really very high.
And Jane, what would you say to people, perhaps from the religious community, who would say if someone wants to take part in this sort of thing and it's not coercive, then that should be allowed? And actually, if we were going to ban that, that would be an infringement on people's liberty. What would you say to people that have that opinion?
Well, all forms of conversion therapy are by their very nature coercive. In fact, the truth is the fact that someone's grown up in an environment where they're told, as I was, that who you are is sinful, wrong, and abomination, meant that I willingly went out and sought for 20 years people who would pray for me, people who would deliver me from what we thought were various spirits, people who would give me counselling and healing prayer. And it meant that I ended up in hospital fighting for my life, with my body cracking up under the strain. And I know so many others haven't actually survived that. So all forms are coercive and need to be banned. But if we put in a coercive clause, which is what we understood the Prime Minister was thinking about, it puts all the onus on the vulnerable victim to prove that they were coerced, rather than on the perpetrator, who gets away with carrying on as they always have. So,
and Jane, when you hear ministers like Kemi Badenoch talking about unintended consequences, and that it cannot be right that therapists who are having challenging conversations with people suffering from gender distress about transitioning cannot be criminalised, what do you say to that? Because surely it cannot be right that therapists and families having those difficult conversations are banned from doing so as a result of this legislation.
Well, it's complete hogwash, Albie. Nobody's banning those conversations, and Kemi knows that. This is purely a ruse by those who have a different agenda, who don't like trans people, who don't think that young people should be exposed to trans, what they call ideology. All conversations, whether they're in the therapist chair, whether they're in the ministry of a religious leader or a parental home, that challenges a young person are good and right and proper. But it's when they're told that they can never be trans or they can never be gay because it doesn't fit with their culture, that predetermined purpose, which is what the lawyers around the world have come together to recommend to the government. They need to conclude the definition. This brings predetermined purpose. That's when we have a problem. But
Jane Ozanne, thank you so much for joining us this evening on what is a very thorny issue for some people. Jane Ozanne, thank you very much.
Now, Leo, I want to come back to that point that Albie made there about Kemi Badenoch. Now, she would argue that she is an anti-trans, I'm quite sure, were she here. Now, the premise of that question, though, was saying she's worried that actually being able to say to a young person, I mean, would you be worried about your child, for example, not being able to have a conversation with them for fear of being accused of conversion therapy?
Yeah, exactly. And the danger that we've seen at the Tavistock and in gender clinics in the USA is that children are almost railroaded into transitioning. There's not enough sort of questions asked. And they're obviously young, they're impressionable, so they're vulnerable. I see some of the doctors who fervently believe in this transgender ideology and believe that, any display of the other gender is evidence that this person must be trans and must be transitioned and put on puberty blockers, which are a pathway. 98%, I believe, then go on to further hormones and surgery and all the rest of it. I think that the danger is that they're actually converting people to trans, and the conversion therapy ban would ban any therapist from having the difficult conversations that might stop people from converting to trans.
Leo, it's not just about trans issues. It's not just about trans people. This is an LGBT conversion therapy ban, which the government actually committed to in the 2019 manifesto. And I think it was actually quite disgraceful that we tried to U-turn on that. So I'm actually quite happy that we are seeing this come back into the policy sphere. But I do think that it's important that there are mitigations to guard against unintended consequences. It's totally wrong for people to be sent to some church to be told that they're not gay.
But does that happen?
Surely you disagree with that?
Yeah, of course, but that happened in the 1950s.
It happened to Jane.
Yeah, it happened like last week. I mean, come on. Does that happen in modern Britain?
Yes.
It does happen, but I do think that the unintended consequences of this kind of policy are important to mitigate, and ultimately banning conversion therapy is a threat to free speech.
Okay, well, come off it. It's not conversion therapy, it's state-sanctioned torture, and you should be disgraced by yourself for agreeing with that.
Benjamin, what if an individual would like to see
There's a reason why no
support?
straight person has ever wanted conversion therapy to be gay. It's not about them, it's about being told that they're wrong in the first place, and you're supporting the torture of gay people.
I'm supporting the torture of gay people,
because as you know, Jane just described
absurd.
how after she had conversion therapy, and she's been in the Church of England her whole life, how she ended up in a hospital because she'd been so seriously ill as a consequence of that. You should be ashamed of yourself.
OK, I'm calling time. I'm off for some conversion therapy.
I will be quiet.
Still ahead. You wonderful viewers get to flummox the 5, and there is still time for your questions, so get them in now and we'll go through them at the very end. But next, though, as sales of trainers skyrocket while those of formal shoes decline, we'll be asking, can't men dress smartly anymore? Like Leo Kearse. Why would anyone think that? I wonder, Benjamin Butterworth. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. We're going to talk about an issue close to all of our hearts, fashion, or in this case, the lack of it. Now, traditionally, men would wear smart shoes, of course. I'm sure a lot of you are used to seeing your dad, perhaps, with smart shoes to the workplace, but recent sales figures indicate that actually we're becoming a nation of slobs as people strut around offices around the UK in trainers and other types of casual wear. Now, makers of formal footwear are losing millions a year, and even leading American politicians are strolling around the Senate in shorts and trainers. Is this an outrage? Are you outraged? Leo, I want to start with you first of all. Oh, I'm going to Ingrid, actually. I'm going to the wonderful Ingrid Tarrant. So here to discuss the lamentable decline in standards. It's the TV personality and broadcaster, Ingrid Tarrant. Ingrid, men can't dress properly these days. What do you think's gone wrong?
Well, first of all, can I just ask you men to just put your best foot forward for me?
Well, I mean, if I put my shoes up... I have actually got a pair of trainers on, I'm afraid, but Leo's got lovely brown shoes on. Size 14. They're like boats, Ingrid.
Well, actually, I've been looking at your footwear, and 50% of you are wearing trainers, so there's you and Benjamin, and Albie and Leo are wearing shoes. But on the whole, most men are wearing trainers. And that is the end, really kind of the end of the lovely polished shoe, which I love, I have to say. And... do you know, I know what started this. It has to be David Beckham, because he made all these trainers fashionable and everything. And, you know, I was looking at the figures are absolutely shocking how much they've lost in revenue. £23 million in lost revenue by churches. Remember churches?
Yes.
And Trickers have lost £300,000 in the last year. So they need to do like a thing with David Beckham and get him to wear the lovely old robes and get that back on track.
Well, you know, Ingrid, actually, I read that Tony Blair used to wear a pair of Church's shoes at Prime Minister's Questions every week, so maybe that's what's done it for poor churches.
Oh, you're right. I didn't think of that. Oh, yeah, well, let's blame him.
And if we're saying Tony Blair is the sort of icon of fashion, then we're all just going off on a tangent to nowhere, aren't we?
Well, there's just absolutely no hope. But talking about footwear, which we started off, because that was the story today in the paper, as you rightly said, in the Senate. Also, the other thing is, it's not just the shoes, it's the attire. I'm talking about men specifically. And just recently, well, on the 4th of October, to be precise, I feel like I'm going to be like a detective here taking notes. On the 4th of December, the Cardiff University Students' Union banned, or a temporary ban, I should say, on chinos and blue shirts because of, and I quote, dangerous behaviour portrayed by groups of individuals wearing chinos and blue shirts in the Yolo's a nightclub, queue on the 4th of October. So now they've put a temporary ban on that. So I'm looking again at you guys and what you're wearing. I mean, Leo, you look fantastic.
He does.
If I was on the pull, I'd go for you.
Oh, well, there we are. There we are. That's a ringing endorsement, Ingrid.
Wasting my time, wouldn't I?
Ingrid, would you say actually that you would go as far as to say we need to start doing what that university's done and start banning people from wearing these items of clothing that are too relaxed?
No, because this was smart casual.
That was smart casual. Right, OK, so that you draw the line at trainers, though. You draw the line at trainers.
preppy. It was kind of the preppy look, I think. And it was how dare you be a privileged preppy type of attitude.
So Ingrid, then, just to end on that, who is your ideal man to model the nation on?
Well, tonight I'd say Leo, but I think you've got me on the spot there.
Leo Curse, Leo Curse, look at that, look at that. All right. Ingrid, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. That's Ingrid Tarrant there, the TV personality and broadcaster. Now, Leo, I want to start with you. You don't normally dress so lovely, do you? You're in for a special...
Yeah, I had to film a promo before this show. Not that this show isn't important to me, but I did dress up for the...
He's always in a
great shirt.
Oh, he is, but he doesn't normally make so much of an effort, is what I'm saying.
He's got the waistcoat and the blazer.
I got married in this suit.
Oh, wow.
Did you actually?
Yeah.
Wow, and she's still with you.
Are you shocked, shocked that he got married or that it was in that suit?
Both. I mean, look, it's lovely of Ingrid to say you're the best dressed. If you look just out of shot, she has a guide dog, though, so...
Not quite the same. Look, I actually think Ingrid makes a very good point. We've seen a decline in the way men dress. I want to see... I'm very attracted to men that wear lovely suits, and I think I'd like to see more men walking around in suits. We see them nowadays in tracksuits, or even at the office, you see men... no longer wearing a tie. I would like to see more men dress more sort of professionally. If you go back to the 19th century, this was normal. People, even working class people, would be dressed in this way.
I mean, my granddad always used to, he was down the pit and he used to always dress up in a suit every time he went out. So
top hat must have been tricky
not the top hat, not the top hat. Whilst I go look for me top hat and tails, coming up next, we'll be answering your questions in Flummox the Five. But far more importantly than that, we'll be paying tribute to footballing legend Sir Bobby Charlton, who sadly passed away today. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. Now, before we finish the show, we wanted to pay tribute to the legendary England footballer Bobby Charlton, who has passed away at the age of 86. So we're going to get more on this from the voice of sport here at GB News, Aidan McGee. Aidan, cheers very much for your company. We've lost one of England's greatest players of all time here, haven't we?
Good evening, Darren, first of all, and to the rest of the Saturday Five crew. Yes, that would be putting it mildly. I mean, there was a dwindling band of players still surviving from the 1966 triumph, and we're now just left with one, and that's Sir Geoff Hurst. Bobby Charlton, though, he was a stellar name throughout his career, and consider everything, if we strip things back to what was the very beginning for him. He was born in the northeast of England in Ashington. He grew up in a football family. The great Jackie Milburn, who you'll be familiar with as a Newcastle United fan, played for the local team. But Bobby, who you can see in the picture there in his Man United shirt, and his brother Jack, they went off to find fame, fortune and success. Jack at Leeds and Bobby over at Manchester United. The two of them didn't really get on through vast periods of their professional lives, not just because they faced each other on the pitch. There were family rivalry to contend with as well. But if you think that Bobby Charlton was part of the Busby Babes of 1958, most of that team perished on the runway in Munich. When the team were on their way back from a European tie. European football was quite a fledgling thing back then. Manchester United were kind of looked down upon for even taking part in the competition. So that was a team that contained players like Duncan Edwards as well as Bobby Charlton. And they didn't actually get to fulfil what they were predestined to do. And so to come back from that 10 years later, be part of that rebuild, Darren, and to claim a European Cup at Wembley for Manchester United against Benfica and the great Eusebio under the Twin Towers was an extraordinary achievement. To my knowledge, he is the only English player to have won both the World Cup and the European Cup. You consider his numbers as well, 249 goals in 758 games for Manchester United. For England, it was 49 goals in 106 caps. That record was only broken in 2016 by Wayne Rooney. Gary Lineker got quite close to it in the early 90s. But this was in a period as well where midfielders didn't really score goals. He wasn't a striker, Darren. This is the important thing to consider here. He was sometimes a deep-lying midfielder, but he actually got forward a lot in an era when midfielders weren't really expected to score goals, and yet he still surpassed that all the same. In terms of his life after football, don't underestimate the influence he had on David Beckham's career. We saw in the Netflix documentary that Beckham's father was a huge fan of Bobby Charlton and taught him to kick the ball like Bobby Charlton in his back garden. He was also part of the Bobby Charlton soccer school back in the 80s. He actually won the thing, unbelievably, which was unheard of for a boy from East London. But he was taken under the wing of Bobby Charlton, and Beckham was clearly in awe of the player and got to know him, of course, later on when he played. Sir Alex Ferguson said in his book quite clearly, many times actually, that when things were going bad for Sir Alex in the early period at United, probably 86 to 91, Bobby Charlton, as a director, stuck up for him at every single turn because he knew somebody who was doing the right thing in football, and he was extremely loyal. Sir Alex Ferguson counts on that friendship a great deal. Don't forget as well the influence he had over London 2012. I actually interviewed him at the Laureus Sports Award in London 2012, and we were both living in Manchester at the time, both living in Cheshire, not too far from each other. I think his house was probably slightly bigger than mine, actually. But nonetheless, we didn't really discuss much about football. We discussed stuff about life. And he's very generous with his time and a very warm individual and an absolute giant, Darren, of English football and international football.
Aidan, before we go to our next topic there, I just wanted to ask you, some people feel that actually we've lost what was the very best generation of England's footy players, a different breed, they might say, true gents. Do you think, is that sadly true? When you see Man United with their black armbands and things like that, are you feeling a sense of greater loss?
Well, I'm old enough to remember back in 1993, Darren, when we lost Sir Bobby Moore, the captain of that great side. It was the late Millwall chairman, Reg Burr, who said to me over the phone when I was asking for a tribute, he said, "Aidan, it feels like we've lost a link to a better era." 30 years on, almost exactly 30 years on, I feel the same, actually, Darren. I'm sure you do as well, that we have lost a link to a better era. And don't forget, those players still stand alone in that 66 team as the side who won the World Cup. We've seen so many times since then. We've gone close a few times, but we haven't actually picked up the trophy. Are we closer to doing it now than we were at any time in the last 10, 15 years? Yes, I would say so. But crossing the line, as those guys did in '66, remains uncharted territory for our current players.
Indeed. Aidan McGee, thank you very much for that brilliant tribute there. Now, folks...
Cheers, Darren. All the best.
It's time to flummox the five, where you wonderful viewers set the agenda. So cheers very much for sending in all your questions for us. I'm going to get the ball rolling with this question from Sandy. Now, Sandy's written in and she says, will Rishi Sunak rally the Conservative Party in time for the next general election? Or is he just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic? I think I've got to put that one to Albion Corner.
I think he can. I think he can get the Conservative Party in good fighting order for the next general election. Look, what people were hearing on the doorstep out in Tamworth and in mid-Bedfordshire was that our voters didn't want to come out and vote. They wanted a reason to come out and vote Conservative, but they just weren't hearing one. So if they do hear a good, compelling Conservative reason to vote for Rishi Sunak, I believe our voters will come back out to back.
And what are they?
But we've got to give them one. We've got to give them one.
Exactly. That's the point. Leo, what are the Conservative reasons to vote for the Conservative Party?
Well, I think Rishi's kind of unfortunate because I think the reason to vote for the Conservatives is that he's like the first leader in a while who's been competent and plausible and hasn't lied and hasn't made a great mess in a short period of time. So, I mean, I trust Rishi as a leader. So it's a shame he's come in on the sort of tail end of a Conservative administration.
So do you think he's up, the Titanic, that comparison, is that fair?
Yeah, I think the Conservative Party are just tired. They've been in power too long. We see this around this point. Same thing happened to Labour last time round under Tony Blair.
All right, Reem, very briefly.
Let's not forget Rishi Sunak was Chancellor during the COVID lockdowns. He is responsible for the expansion of the welfare state, the expansion of public spending and ultimately quantitative easing, which has resulted in this economic mess.
OK, Benjamin, I know what you think, that he is snookered.
Well, if this happens right after conference, when he's had this big pitch to the country and announced new ideas, and then the Tories do that badly, that really doesn't
Well, it was hardly a big pitch. I think I'm with Benjamin Butterworth on that one. But our next question is from Christian. Christian says, lefties say we cannot close our open southern border because it's not compassionate. How about we stop the boats but simultaneously commit to extra monetary aid directly for countries people are fleeing from? Well, do you know what, Christian? I've been struck by something today because I've seen a lot of people talking about Palestine's rights to have secure borders and all the rest of it. But Leo Kearse, they don't seem very keen on us having our own.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, some people have been saying we should take in refugees from Gaza. And, while, I really sympathise with their plight, I don't think, given the rising levels of anti-Semitism in the UK, it's the ideal time to bring in hundreds of thousands of Palestinians.
All right. Now, next, though, we've got this question from Robert. Robert says, do you think our next PM should be under 40? I mean, Reem, you're young.
Well, maybe then they'd solve the housing crisis. I mean, really, there is nothing. Let's think about the current situation. We've got huge amounts of intergenerational inequality. We've got the triple lock on pensions, which effectively means, I know a lot of our viewers won't like this, but unfortunately it means that 27% of pensioners are millionaires and they're unable to then go on to buy different houses. I just want to make this very small point. The housing crisis impacts last-time buyers as much as it impacts first-time buyers, and it means that many of those family homes are not being opened up.
And I hear that point, but I don't think the age of a politician denotes on whether or not they're going to be good on housing.
That's true.
Rishi Sunak is 42, Keir Starmer's almost 60. Who's got the better position on housing? The boomer politician versus the millennial politician. So I just want a politician that's good on housing.
Look, age does matter because half of the US's leaders are dropping dead in post.
Well, that is true. Now, our final question is from Alice, and Alice says, what do you think of a dress-down Friday in the workplace? Well, I mean, we've got a dress-down Saturday.
It seems like it's dressed down every day these days. I mean, I would be OK with the dress-down Friday if Monday to Thursday was dress up, but unfortunately that's not the case.
Is it very libertarian to be telling people what they should and shouldn't wear?
Well, if I owned a company, I would be well within my right of freedom of association to tell my employees how they should dress. But you're absolutely right, the government shouldn't be doing that. But I can say that from a cultural perspective, I would like to see people dressing better.
I mean, Leo, would you advocate His Majesty's government actually printing off a picture review and sending it to every household and saying this is the standard.
Only today. You wouldn't want to see me on other days when I'm sitting in my underpants.
We're going to have to leave it there. What a perfect time to end the show. Thanks very much to the wonderful Reem Ibrahim and Leo Kirst for being our guests tonight, and to all of our brilliant viewers. Now, folks, the one and only Mark Dolan is next, but we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to Sunday, for much of the UK it's going to be a dry day, especially for parts of Scotland, and all of us should see some sunshine. We are still dominated by this area of low pressure, so we will continue to see the risk of some showers, but we certainly will lose the heavy and persistent rain which we have seen over the last few days. The last of that will move up into parts of Orkney and Shetland overnight, so most of us seeing a drier picture. Still the risk of some showers across western parts. Over towards the east, could just see a few mist and fog patches forming, and in the countryside could see temperatures falling into mid-single figures. So we start Sunday off with potentially a few mist and fog patches, but they will quickly clear. And then for many, it is a much drier and brighter day. Still the risk of some showers across western parts. They may well just creep a little bit further east from time to time, but basically the further east you are, the greater chance of staying dry throughout the day. Temperatures in the north very similar to what we've seen recently, 10 to 12 degrees, potentially up to about 15 degrees in the south. Heading into Monday, a dry start for most, potentially a frosty start actually for Scotland. As we go through the course of the day, outbreaks of rain will come close to parts of Northern Ireland, and then later on we'll then see a band of rain working in across southern parts of England. And that really sets us up for another unsettled spell as we go towards the middle of the week.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position